Oh God, I hate this.
Oh look, it's going everywhere. Hang on. So nobody got shot.
Where is the land?
Oh look, it's everywhere.
Oh, there, this bloody thing.
For decades, the royal family has been defined by elegance, restraint, and carefully guarded secrets. But every so often, something erupts that shatters the calm. Tensions reportedly exploded inside Buckingham Palace when Queen Camilla made a shocking claim over the late Queen's iconic Range Rover, allegedly wanting it for her own son. What followed was said to be a furious outburst from King Charles himself. Behind the polished smiles, royal tempers flared and loyalties were tested. So, what truly happened behind those gilded palace doors? The auction, the fallout, and the war within. On August 23, 2025, the Silverstone Festival shimmered with nostalgia and royal splendor. Under soft golden lights, thousands gathered to witness something that felt more like a farewell than an auction. The sale of Queen Elizabeth II's beloved Range Rover, the same vehicle that once rolled through Scottish mist, carrying the scent of history and grace. The auctioneer lifted his gavel, his voice steady but charged with reverence. Opening bid, £50,000. What followed was a rush of emotion and ambition. Hands shot up, voices rang through the hall like fireworks bursting in the night. 80,000! 100,000! 150! The air pulsed with energy, with sentiment, with the ache of remembrance. For many, bidding on that car wasn't about ownership. It was devotion, a last attempt to touch a memory that had shaped a nation. Then, from the front row, a calm figure raised his paddle. £175,000, said Richard Halpern in a voice that silenced the room. The gavel struck. Sold! Thunderous applause filled the air. Strangers hugged. Some even wept. To them, the legacy had found a worthy guardian. But somewhere above the crowd, in a private suite overlooking the hall, King Charles sat still, expressionless, distant. His phone buzzed. A message blinked across the screen. Funds used by Halpern traced to Queen Elizabeth Charitable Trust. Full evidence attached. The sender? Edward Mallory. Charles froze. The noise below faded until there was only the soft thud of his heart. The car vanished from his thoughts. All he could see was his mother, her laughter, her steady gaze, her quiet strength. And then came the chilling realization. Her own charity, her life's work of giving, had been used to buy her car. He whispered, almost to himself, "She's tainted my mother's memory. And for what? Pride?" That night, while London slept under the watch of the moon, Clarence House brimmed with an unbearable silence. In his private study, Charles waited. When Camilla entered, the air was thick with words unspoken. "This isn't about money," he said quietly, his voice trembling with restraint. "It's about respect. You took from her charity, from her legacy, to glorify yourself." Camilla's eyes flashed, her composure fragile yet fierce. "Yes, Charles, because she never accepted me. Even as queen, I am still the woman the world loves to hate. She denied me dignity, so I took it back. For myself, for my children. What she refused to give in life, I will claim in memory." Before he could respond, the door opened. Princess Anne stepped in, her presence sharp and cold as steel. "You've disgraced her memory," she said evenly. "You've betrayed everything she lived for. Honesty, duty, humility. Her spirit isn't something you can possess." Camilla's jaw tightened. "You've never forgiven me for existing." Anne moved closer. "You mistake endurance for forgiveness." The silence was unbearable. Then Charles spoke, his voice breaking like thin glass. "From this moment, nothing of my mother's, not her car, not her jewels, not her legacy, belongs to you. Leave." Camilla's eyes shimmered. Wounded, proud, defiant, she turned slowly and walked away. The door closed softly behind her, but its echo lingered, filling Clarence House with the sound of a royal heart breaking. But why was Queen Elizabeth's Range Rover being auctioned? Why did the auction cause an uproar? Let's find out. The car that stirred a kingdom. In the mellow twilight of Britain's summer of 2025, when the royal family appeared to have finally achieved a delicate calm after years of turmoil, an unexpected storm began to gather, not over matters of state, politics, or protocol, but over something far more ordinary: a car. It wasn't just any car. It was a 2006 dark green Range Rover, once owned and driven by the late Queen Elizabeth II. To most Britons, it was merely a relic of royal nostalgia, a practical yet stately vehicle that perfectly captured the Queen's essence: steady, resilient, and quietly powerful. For decades, the public had admired photos of her behind its wheel, gliding through the misty trails of Balmoral in her headscarf and raincoat, exuding that familiar air of composed authority. It was an image that became symbolic: the Queen as both sovereign and servant, a leader who preferred steering her own path. But within the walls of the royal residences, the car carried meanings far deeper than the public could imagine. For King Charles, it was far more than metal and leather. It was a symbol of his mother's strength, of the woman who had ruled unbroken for 70 years, through wars, scandals, and generational shifts. To him, the Range Rover was the last tangible echo of her presence, a silent reminder of her endurance and the standard she had set for all who carried the Windsor name. So, when rumors reached his ears that Queen Camilla, the woman who had walked beside him through decades of controversy, heartbreak, and redemption, had expressed interest in the car, something in the king cracked. The whisper suggested she intended to gift it to a member of her own family, not out of sentiment for the late queen, but as an heirloom of her own choosing. It was, to Charles, an unthinkable act, a trespass into sacred memory. "Not my mother's car," the king roared, his voice trembling with restrained fury. "Not hers, not ever." The echo of those words reportedly rolled through Clarence House like a thunderclap over the Scottish hills. Courtiers froze, aides exchanged nervous glances, and though the palace would later attempt to smother the story beneath layers of polished silence, the spark had already caught flame. Behind the palace gates, a quiet war began, one of pride, possession, and the ghosts of old wounds never healed. What might have been a trivial disagreement to the outside world quickly became the seed of a larger reckoning. The Range Rover, once a symbol of stability and strength, now stood at the center of a family feud that peeled back the royal veneer of grace and unity. In the weeks that followed, the media would dub it the Range Rover scandal. But to those inside the royal circle, it was far more personal, a clash of loyalties, love, and legacy. For beneath the glitter of crowns and the weight of history, it revealed something profoundly human. Even kings and queens beneath all the ceremony are not immune to the raw power of memory, emotion, and the longing to hold on to what and whom they've lost. In that quiet storm over a single car, the monarchy once again found itself wrestling not just with public perception, but with its own fragile heart. How did the public react to the sight of Queen Elizabeth's Range Rover on auction? What was the bidding like? Let's delve into the details of the nation's reaction to Queen Elizabeth's auctioned Range Rover, the car that held the nation's heart. When the announcement came that Queen Elizabeth II's Range Rover would be auctioned at the prestigious Silverstone Festival, Britain went into a wave of nostalgia. It wasn't just about a car. It was about memory. Newspapers splashed old photos of the Queen driving across Balmoral's green hills, her laughter caught mid-frame. Morning talk shows replayed clips of her waving to farmers and stopping for shepherds. Online, one viral post captured the mood perfectly. That car carried more than the Queen. It carried the heart of a nation. The opening bid was set at £50,000. But even before the auction began, the emotional value had already multiplied 1,000-fold. Ordinary Britons began to imagine the car in their driveways, as though possessing it could bring them closer to the woman who had shaped their lives from the throne and from behind the steering wheel alike. But far away from the public's misty-eyed sentimentality, behind the thick curtains of Clarence House, a far darker emotion brewed, one that was about power, pride, and rewriting history. How did Camilla get into the picture? Why did she want the Range Rover so badly? Let's dig into the details of Camilla's subtle revenge. Camilla's quiet rebellion. In the warm pool of her study lamp, Queen Camilla sat alone and read the headline, "The Queen's Range Rover to be auctioned. A piece of history." Up for grabs, her mouth tightened into a curve that was not quite a smile, something quieter, older, and pained. To everyone else, she was the reigning monarch. In the record books, she was Queen Camilla, yet inside, she felt a truth that papers could not change. She would never stand like Elizabeth had, unchallenged, beloved, and unquestioned. She remembered every long shadow that had followed her. First, the bright, tragic light that fell on Diana, then the cool, judging presence of Elizabeth. For years, she moved through royal life with whispers trailing every step, a ribbon to cut, a wave to give, a photograph taken, and somewhere behind the silver curtain of public ceremony, people muttered, "She does not belong." Those words were like small knives. Elizabeth's coldness had been no secret. The late Queen's manner with Camilla was careful, polite, and distant. Once, at a private dinner, Elizabeth delivered a sentence so cutting that its echo still lodged in Camilla's chest. Spoken with the calm of someone used to power, it landed like a verdict. "You are an inconvenience we are obliged to endure." The sentence burned in Camilla's memory, a dry, private shame. So the auction notice landed like a tiny, bright key on a heavy door. The object up for sale was ordinary in shape, but enormous in meaning. Elizabeth's Range Rover, a piece of her daily life, a small emblem of the late Queen's presence. A plan took shape inside Camilla's mind, not from greed, but from a fierce, simple hunger to belong, to let her family's name sit quietly and finally in the same frame as the late Queen's. If her son drove that car, the story could tilt. Future conversations might say, that vehicle was once Elizabeth's. Now it sits with Camilla's family. In that gentle shift, an outsider might become part of the story. That was the small, sharp victory she craved. Not vindication shouted from banners, but history nudged in her direction. But she knew the danger. To bid openly would hand the press a feast. The public would spin the gesture into a scandal. So she drew a delicate line of secrecy, a plan that read like a scene from a soft spy tale. She chose an ally, Richard Halpern, an American of means and a steady supporter of causes she held dear. He would appear at the auction, bid in his own name, and buy the car. Later, as a friendly gift, he would pass it to Tom, her son. The gesture would look innocent, almost like a private kindness. To make the plan work, small sums needed to travel quietly. Camilla arranged tiny transfers from the Queen Elizabeth Charitable Trust, each hidden in plain sight as a donation, and routed through a tangle of accounts so it all looked neat on paper. Each slice was minute, each route precise, calculated to avoid notice. On paper it was clean. In truth, it tasted wrong to her, a moral compromise that left a bitter aftertaste. As she signed the final form and tucked the papers away, she breathed a single low vow. The world might continue to remember Elizabeth first, but in the small private ledger of family stories, she would leave a mark. This time, she told herself, history would have to make room for her too. She wanted desperately to be remembered with dignity. Why would Camilla hold on tight to revenge? Didn't Queen Elizabeth eventually warm up towards her later, before her death? Let's dive into the details of the relationship shared between Camilla and Elizabeth. Camilla's journey to acceptance. Camilla Parker, Bowles's transformation from public enemy to respected queen consort is one of the most astonishing journeys in modern royal history. Once despised as the other woman who came between Prince Charles and Princess Diana, she has today become an accepted, even admired figure within the British monarchy, a feat that once seemed impossible. Decades ago, Camilla was the name whispered in anger across Britain. Queen Elizabeth II reportedly referred to her as that wicked woman because of her affair with Prince Charles during his marriage to Diana, the people's princess. The relationship between Charles and Camilla was more than a royal scandal. It was a national heartbreak that deeply embarrassed the royal family. When Diana died tragically in 1997, the world mourned, and public hatred for Camilla intensified. Many believed that the Queen would never allow her son's longtime companion to enter the royal circle. Determined to protect the monarchy's image, Queen Elizabeth even instructed Charles's private secretary, Michael Peet, to convince him to end things with Camilla once and for all. But fate took an ironic turn. Peet saw how genuine their love was and instead encouraged Charles to marry her, arguing that marriage would settle the storm and bring legitimacy to their relationship. By the early 2000s, Camilla began the delicate process of winning acceptance, not through grand gestures, but through quiet endurance and grace. She slowly stepped into public life, attending royal events with composure and warmth. Princes William and Harry, who had once kept their distance, eventually grew to appreciate her kindness and the happiness she brought to their father. William even called her a wonderful woman, signaling that healing was underway within the royal family. The Queen's icy stance gradually melted. At Christmas in 2004, she finally gave her approval for Charles and Camilla to marry. As a powerful gesture of acceptance, she gifted Charles a platinum and diamond engagement ring from her personal collection, a silent yet profound symbol that the royal resistance had ended. Their 2005 wedding was modest yet meaningful. It was a civil ceremony in Windsor rather than a grand church affair, a reflection of both caution and compromise. Although the Queen did not attend the ceremony itself, she joined the religious blessing and the reception afterward, publicly acknowledging the new Duchess of Cornwall. It was a small step with immense symbolism. The monarchy was learning to embrace forgiveness and modern love. From then on, Camilla proved herself with quiet dignity. She never sought the spotlight, never fought for attention, and never complained. Instead, she devoted herself to charitable work, championing literacy, supporting victims of abuse, and lending her voice to issues often ignored. Her down-to-earth personality, gentle humor, and genuine commitment to her duties gradually earned her respect from the public and the Queen herself. Over time, she became a dependable pillar within the firm, the royal institution. Her consistency and discretion restored confidence in her place beside Charles. In 2016, Queen Elizabeth appointed her to the Privy Council, a clear sign of trust and seniority. 5 years later, Camilla received one of Britain's highest honors, the Order of the Garter. Then, during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee in 2022, the monarch made a historic declaration. She wished that Camilla be known as Queen Consort when Charles took the throne. It was the final seal of acceptance, the ultimate transformation from scandal to sovereignty. Camilla's story is one of endurance, humility, and redemption. She waited, endured criticism, and never fought back with words. Instead, she let time, loyalty, and love speak for her. Today, as Queen Camilla stands beside King Charles III, her journey reminds the world that even in the most rigid institutions, grace and patience can rewrite the harshest of stories. From being vilified as that wicked woman, she became one of the Crown's most trusted and enduring figures, proof that with resilience and sincerity, even scandal can blossom into respect. How did King Charles discover Queen Camilla's subtle plot? Were other members of the royal family also able to discover the plan? What was the reaction like towards Camilla? Let's find out. Anne's discovery and the king's wrath. But the royal household, as always, sees everything. Eyes and ears hidden in every corner, whispers carried through servants' corridors, and fate, that relentless force, has a way of rewarding truth while punishing deceit. It began with Princess Anne, the late Queen Elizabeth's most dutiful and unyielding daughter. While reviewing her mother's estate documents, Anne noticed something that made her heart tighten. The late Queen's Range Rover, once listed as a national artifact, had been quietly reclassified as a private asset, eligible for sale. The alteration was recent, far too recent. Anne's instincts, sharpened by decades of navigating royal politics and palace intrigue, immediately sensed foul play. "Someone's tampering with Mother's legacy," she muttered under her breath. The Queen's estate had always been sacred ground, a symbol of duty and honor. Any sign of manipulation was an unforgivable trespass. Without hesitation, Anne reached for her secure line. "Edward," she said, when her brother's financial advisor, Edward Mallory, picked up. Her tone was cold but steady. "I want you to look into every transfer linked to the Queen Elizabeth Trust, quietly, and keep an eye on Camilla's accounts, discreetly." Anne's motives weren't born of jealousy. She had long made peace with Camilla's place beside her brother, King Charles, but exploiting their mother's memory, twisting the legacy of the woman who had defined British monarchy, was something she could not and would not forgive. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Camilla was setting her plan into motion. Her official reason for being in New York was to attend a high-profile charity gala, a perfect cover. But behind the glamorous facade, she had arranged a secret meeting with Richard Halpern, a wealthy financier known for his ability to make fortunes disappear into trusts and foundations. In a private suite at the Waldorf Astoria, Camilla sat across from Halpern. The atmosphere was thick with tension and unspoken fear. Halpern's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "Your Majesty, this could end badly if it comes to light." Camilla's eyes, sharp, calculating, and cold, locked onto his. "Charles sees only what I allow him to see," she said evenly. Then, with a deliberate motion, she slid a sealed envelope across the table, filled with instructions, financial details, and her personal authorization. Halpern hesitated for a moment before taking it. The deal was done, but fate, as it often does, had other plans. By sheer coincidence, Sir Geoffrey Hargreaves, an old confidant of the king and one of the few men Charles truly trusted, was staying in the same hotel. As he entered the lobby that afternoon, he caught a glimpse of the Queen Consort in private conversation with Halpern. Curiosity overcame decorum. Quietly he followed, careful not to be seen. From a distance, he watched as they exchanged papers, her gloved hand passing over the envelope. The scene was too suspicious to ignore. He took out his phone. One click, then another. 3 photographs. The Queen, the billionaire, the envelope. By the time Camilla's plane landed back in London, those photographs were already on King Charles's mahogany desk at Clarence House. When Camilla entered, she found her husband waiting, still, silent, with an expression that chilled her to the bone. His normally calm blue eyes now blazed with hurt and betrayal. "I know about New York," he said finally. "The meeting, the documents." Camilla tried to remain composed. "It was for charity," she replied coolly. Charles slammed the photographs on the table. "Charity business?" he thundered. "With my mother's trust?" The confrontation erupted like a storm. Words became weapons, sharp, wounding, irreversible. Charles accused her of betraying his mother's legacy, of tarnishing the memory of the Queen who had defined duty and devotion. Camilla fired back, accusing him of never truly seeing her, of loving only the ghost of a woman she could never replace. His anger came from heartbreak, hers from years of being shadowed by the memory of another. When Camilla finally turned and stormed out, the heavy door slammed shut behind her, echoing through the palace halls. Charles stood there, shoulders trembling, his crown suddenly feeling heavier than ever. He turned to Mallory, who stood silently in the corner, eyes downcast. "Find me proof," Charles said in a voice that had lost all warmth. "Whatever it costs." Outside, the autumn rain began to fall, soft, steady, and merciless, as the House of Windsor braced itself for yet another reckoning written in secrets and silence. While it sounded trivial to a few, the auction of the iconic Range Rover seemed to have sent a great shock to the royal family. What memory does it trigger in the royal family? How did the media and public address it? Let's take a look at the legacy of Queen Elizabeth that still rules after her death. A legacy that still rules. Outside, London lay wrapped in the soft hush of night. The grand city, usually alive with endless motion, now seemed to rest beneath a blanket of mist. Buckingham Palace glowed faintly in the distance, its golden lights trembling like distant stars. Yet behind those graceful walls, far from the calm streets, the royal household stirred with unease. Power had changed hands, but peace had not followed. The late Queen's Range Rover, that simple yet iconic car she had driven across the Highlands and through the quiet roads of Windsor, had become a national treasure. The crown quietly reclaimed it, placing it under the careful supervision of Princess Anne. It would never again belong to a private citizen, never be auctioned or displayed without reverence. It now sat in stillness, preserved not as a vehicle, but as a relic, a silent witness to an age that had ended. To the public, the late Queen's Range Rover symbolized grace, humility, and the quiet strength of Elizabeth II. It evoked memories of her calm presence and reassuring leadership during uncertain times. Yet within the royal family, the car carried a heavier meaning, a symbol of duty, guilt, and the inescapable truth that even in death, the Queen's influence still loomed over them all. King Charles often returned to Balmoral, retracing his mother's steps and driving her old roots in silence. Observers noted the melancholy in his demeanor, as though he searched for her presence in the stillness. He once confided in Princess Anne, "Mother kept us together by silence. Now, without her, silence keeps us apart, revealing the deep loneliness that came with his crown." Meanwhile, Queen Camilla fulfilled her role with composure and elegance, but behind closed doors, she sometimes stood alone by the palace window, whispering into the night, "I only wanted to belong," a quiet plea for acceptance beyond her title. It was not a cry for pity, but a whisper of truth. For years she had been the outsider, the scandal, the shadow behind the throne. And though the world had learned to call her queen, acceptance for her remained something far deeper and more elusive than any crown could offer. Meanwhile, the monarchy itself carried on, elegant on the outside, fragile within. There were no open conflicts, no political upheavals, no loud declarations, yet beneath the silence, an invisible struggle lingered. The real battle was no longer for power or public affection, but for something far more intimate: remembrance. Who would history favor? Who would be remembered as the steady hand, the rightful heart of the family, the one who held the monarchy together through storm and scandal? These questions hovered like ghosts in the palace halls, unanswered, unspoken. And so, the struggle endured, not in the pages of newspapers or in the debates of Parliament, but in the hearts of those who remained. Every glance, every quiet moment, every unspoken word carried the weight of legacy. Because not all wars are fought with armies or politics. Some are fought in silence, for love, for acceptance, and for the right to be remembered. And in that silence, the spirit of Elizabeth II lingered, not as a ruler, but as a reminder that greatness is not always about power, but about presence. And sometimes, the most powerful reign continues even after the crown has been laid to rest. So, what do you think about Camilla's purchase of the iconic Range Rover? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.